Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of the Sage 100 year-end webinars for 2025. Today's session, we're going to be covering required updates, tax form processing, more on what's new for 2025, as well as some more FAQs. My name is Alec Burke, and I've been with Sage for about 18 years now. With me is Linda Raby, who just marked her 28th year, and she'll be assisting with your questions in the Q&A area. And as with yesterday's session, please post your questions in that Q&A area, and we will do our best to circle back to any not answered during the presentation. Try and get them in during the presentation so that we can manage them as we get closer to the end and head into that Q&A session. Any other remaining questions will be posted with answers along with this recording. And keep in mind, there is a short delay when posting questions, so please give it a few minutes for your question to show up. Another reminder, updated and refreshed for 2025. Please take some time to visit our Sage 100 Year-End Center for valuable resources. A direct link will be included in the slide deck, but I'm just going to pull it up for a moment here because it is so helpful. Full of FAQ links, links to learning, checklists, updates, and announcements. It's a really useful resource for the end of the year. Contents for today, we're going to start off with more talk about what's changed in 2025, the OBBBA related changes to overtime and tip reporting, and what's coming next year. We'll talk a little bit about which updates you need, the different variety of updates, how they all work, how to install Aatrix tax reporting, common issues there, updating forms, how to edit employee wage and tax history. We'll look again at the tool we looked at yesterday and some more detail there. Running W-2s and W-3s, how to access the archive, common issues and how to run the forms. Running Affordable Care Act forms, because they are still a thing. They're still here, still need to be filed. How to set up, common issues, how to run those forms. And then finally, running 1099s, 96s, how to check vendor settings, enter history, run forms, and access the archive there. So, as I mentioned yesterday, the key point to start with is quoted directly from the IRS website. And I'm going to repeat a little bit of this for those who weren't here yesterday because it is important. Directly from the IRS, confirming that the W-2s and existing 1099 forms will remain unchanged for tax year 2025. There are still some changes, including the shift of reporting excess golden parachute payments from box 14 on the miscellaneous 1099 to box 3 on the NEC 1099. Please be sure to follow IRS guidance and reporting for this year, including Notice 2025-69, which states that due to the phased rollout of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and the lack of changes to the 2025 Form W-2, 1099 NEC, and 1099 miscellaneous, quote, employers and other payers will not be required to separately account for cash tips or qualified overtime compensation on those forms or the copies of the forms furnished to individuals for 2025, end quote. But you need to be ready for tracking and reporting these items correctly for next year, and with the required updates released later this month, next week actually, your Sage 100 install will be ready to do so. And in a few minutes, we'll look at some of the new settings and fields. We're going to just take a look at this again. We covered it yesterday, but again, it's important. So quick recap, the different variety of updates, what do they do? They're all important. The product update is basically a program update that's downloaded and installed onto your local Sage 100 installation. Again, if we look at the version you're running, Help menu, Sage 100 About, you'll see all of this version detail here. So I'm running 2025, which is 7.40. The 0.2 is the product update. Similarly, there's a payroll update. So the product update is going to update all the program code for all the other modules except for payroll. The payroll update, now I'm running 2.26.0, which will be released soon. Again, hopefully that's on the 18th, barring any other unexpected delays. So this is short form for the year, 2.26, short for 2026, preparing the payroll module program code to handle any changes like the changes with the big beautiful bill that are going to be implemented. That comes mostly through that payroll code update. Separately, payroll has a tax update, a payroll tax update, which I like to kind of say it's better called a payroll tax settings update. That's how you should think about it. So the payroll tax update is the one that's going to pop up and prompt the user to download right in Sage 100 itself. And this synchronizes some tax and payroll settings from our tax cloud down to your Sage 100, your local install itself. So like if there's a new filing status introduced, or if there's new tax rules or tax rule changes for tip treatment, for example, that's how it comes down from our tax cloud into your local install. Finally, the IRD is the special year-end update. That's going to cover specific program changes in preparation for filing tax forms. And the Aatrix forms updates, they update automatically in the background. This year, it's really more important than ever to install the latest updates, even if you don't think you need them now, as they are going to lay programming groundwork for things coming next year. Since we partner with Aatrix as our forms processor, we need to install their add-on software, which is what we use to process the forms, whether printing or e-filing. So I'll walk through how to get that installer started, as the auto installer that our engineers built in is often blocked by Windows or network security. The installers actually run from the same one that you use to install the Sage 100 workstation, which is the part of the program that you actually open and use. And if you don't know where that is, you can check right in your Sage 100 install. And we looked at this yesterday. Very useful when needing to check the correct path when installing your product or payroll updates as well. So that is with the program open, of course, up in the File menu, Run, * info. It's already showing in my program memory because I used it, but you can just type it in. And then you'll see the system information screen. Right in the middle, you've got your installed directory path. So you want to ignore the word home. Path ends in #90. So you can just copy that, open a Network Explorer window. Obviously, I've already got it open here. Paste it into the path at the top and hit enter. That's going to take you to your quote server install, right? This is the main install along with your company data. And then if you scroll down, you'll find the WK setup folder, workstation setup. Open that up. And then you'd right click on auto run and run as administrator. The next window that loads refuses to load on my correct monitor. So on that window, there will be an option that says install federal and state tax reporting. So right click on auto run, always run as administrator, and on the window that pops up, you'll choose install federal and state tax reporting. I want to highlight an article with information directly from Aatrix because the Aatrix forms updates have their own requirements. I'm just going to pull that article up right here. This is another one that's going to be linked on our slide deck. And so this is information directly from the horse's mouth. This is right from Aatrix. And one of the kind of more unique things is that these updates are going to download with a encrypted file, basically. And there are unique requirements. So in order for the automatic updating to work, you'll want to have your IT review this, and you'll find we've added this to a lot of our articles, these collapsible sections, to make it easier to kind of jump to the section that you need. You can cover the basics at the top, and then there's even more detail and program-specific information here that your IT can apply to your network to make sure all of this works smoothly and seamlessly. But as a workaround, if the auto updates are being blocked on your network, you can always install them manually. And that's going to be on aatrix.com, just aatrix.com. Now, this website already knows my my PC. So homepage, aatrix.com, solutions. Oh, looks like it's reset. So you'll go to solutions, then find my solution. You'll get a drop down of all the products. You'll find Sage Solutions, then Sage 100. And here we go. It's going to take you to the site with the download specific for Sage 100. And you'll scroll all the way down to the bottom. And it's this button here. So again, this is how to manually update the forms, the tax reporting add-on yourself, in case the forms aren't updating automatically on your system. So by the time you're running W-2s, you should have had all payroll postings done for the year and confirmed everything looks good on the quarterly tax report. That's the same data that's going to populate the tax forms. So the quarterly tax report is a key report for the end of the year and checking your numbers when you're doing your 941s at the end of every quarter. As I mentioned yesterday, it's possible to make additional corrections to employee wage and tax history right in the employee maintenance window. And how-to steps can be found in the knowledge base article titled Edit Employee Wage and Tax History and Tax Summary, which is also included on the article's reference slide. And we'll take a quick look at another demo there. I know we looked at this yesterday, but we're going to take another look and add some detail. So of course, payroll module, main, employee maintenance. And we're going to select an employee. I'm going to choose one of my test people here. Up to the More button in the upper right, drop down to Tax Summary. And you can see you get kind of a summary by item for the periods and localities you've selected at the top. So I'm going to stick with federal here. We're going to go back up to the More button in the upper right and detail. We get kind of a summary by month here. You can see you've got radio buttons at the top right. You can toggle through the wages, employee or employer tax. But for now, we're just going to drill down using this button on the right. A lot of drill downs here. There's a lot of data tracked in payroll, right? So this is going to get you to the check by check or entry by entry screen. The key thing to remember here to start with is going to be that you have to hit this button to unhide capped wages, because if you are editing anything that has a cap, if the wages have a cap, the capped wages will always be critical. And that's a common mistake people miss. They'll edit the regular wages, but not the capped. And of course, any edits you make in here should be reflecting what actually happened, right? We don't want to report more taxes were paid than actually were paid by the employee, that type of thing, right? So it should accurately reflect. But if you do need to edit, you'll use the Fix button on the right. You'll get the standard warning about being careful, because again, the numbers, the data that you have the power to edit here is the same data that's going to pull into that quarterly tax report and most of the tax reporting forms like the W-2. So it's very powerful and you have to be careful with it. You can see here also there's categories for the tips. This employee did not receive tip pay, so there's nothing in here. But you can edit all of these fields and columns. So I'm just going to back out a couple steps here. Okay, so back to the main employee maintenance window. I'm going to go back up to tax summary. Again, I get this kind of summary screen. This time I'm going to go to more, and instead of detail, I'm going to go to benefits. And we get a little summary window for the benefits. You may spot right away that there's a new field added here for qualified non-taxable overtime, where I have entered in the amount manually for this year. Because the tracking for this, as we'll talk about in a minute, is more complicated than just a simple summary of overtime earnings. This year, you can enter it in manually here if you want to report it on the W-2, and we'll see in a couple minutes how that'll flow onto the form. So that is drop down on benefits instead of detail. So back to the what's new, what's different. I want to take a few minutes to talk about a couple of screenshots here. We've already reviewed that there was a change to the excess golden parachute payments and where on the 1099 to report that. But what about next year? Many of the questions we've had already have been about the no tax on overtime and tips. And as with everything IRS, it's not as simple as one might hope. There are multiple new fields in the program to handle these changes, and you'll do yourself a big favor by making sure they're set up correctly at the start of 2026, because the required reporting is going to begin next year. As everyone's hopefully aware, it's been quite a year, some unique challenges and very delayed information and directives coming from the government. So please be patient when working with my colleagues. There will be more documentation coming soon in the form of new articles in our knowledge base to help you understand how to correctly use the new settings. But just like with the Affordable Care Act forms and the formula to determine whether an employee qualifies as full-time equivalent, tracking the overtime pay is not as simple as just tracking a year-to-date amount. The tax break applies to only a portion of the overtime pay, and to simplify it, if you think of overtime as time and a half, then the tax break applies to the half. So it's critical that the checkbox, the new checkbox for FLSA wages eligible for no tax on overtime is used, so the program can track and calculate the amounts of taxable and non-taxable overtime, and the deductible portion can be applied when employees file their taxes, as that is when any tax relief would come into play. You'll find this option on the earnings code maintenance screen, and obviously you'd want to enable it for any qualifying overtime earnings codes you're using. More of what's coming this time for tips reporting. So again, more information will be coming soon to help guide you through the new settings and tax rules that enable the no tax on tips. Or I did add quotes there. There's always extra detail for all of this, but I'm going to highlight a few things here. On the left, you'll see one of the built-in tips earnings codes. And I want to start by reminding anyone dealing with tips in their payroll that they need to be using the built-in tips earnings codes for tips reporting. Tips reported, tips earned, and allocated. Lower down on that screenshot, you'll see the tax rule field, which should always have a tax rule assigned for every earning code. And if you run a payroll tax update this week, you'll note that the tips tax rule 80041 has been updated with code TP in the description, as it's been prepared to handle the changes relating to the OBBBA. Obviously, there's going to be other tax rules that are related to the tips, and once again, more information coming soon. And as I discussed yesterday, it's really always a good idea to run the payroll tax update report after the update itself is finished, so that you can review any changes relevant to your business and locality. So I'm just going to pop in the product again 1 second here. So payroll, that's going to be down the utilities section. Again, this is the payroll tax update, or think of it as the payroll tax settings update. When you run that, it'll prompt you to run the update report, or you can run it at any time. And it will give you detail about what was downloaded or changed in that update, as well as a link to the online payroll update guide, which will track all of the changes, past and future. For example, as we're talking about the tips tax rules, you'll see this note here. right? So there's a lot of good information here. Always good idea to take a look. Better to be over-informed than under. Okay, so screenshot on the right, I've highlighted the new field in employee maintenance for tracking the employee's tip occupation code following the IRS and Treasury guidelines, as only regularly tipped employees are eligible for this tax relief. Please watch the Sage 100 community page and Year-End Center for updated documentation in the coming weeks. Now let's take a look at actual W-2 processing in the Aatrix tax reporting add-on. So first off, you always want to run forms from the live company and not a copy company, because the forms archive is going to live in the company where it was originally processed, and you'll want all these records together in the same place. For anyone who's been using our payroll for a long time, 10 years ago and versions older than that, things were very different and a copy company was required. That's not been the case for a long, long time. The payroll tracks detailed records year over year following the setting you have in your payroll options, and there's no need to do a copy company at the end of the year. Even if you do still want to do a copy company, you should always run your forms from the live company. So Aatrix has not yet released the 2025 W-2, but you should see it around the time our updates are also released, which again should be next week, December 18th, barring any unforeseen delays. You'll want to have your company's federal and state ID numbers, as well as the contact information entered in company maintenance so that it flows into the tax reporting and you don't have to enter it every time. So for example, I'm running my W-2s for my payroll company. So I've got all my company information filled out here, as well as contact information and my federal ID number. The W-2s and other forms themselves are going to be payroll, period end, federal and state tax reporting. We're going to select the form from the drop-down list. For now, again, it's the 2024 W-2. I'm going to select my range of test employees. But of course, for yourself, you'll want to select the entire range of your employees on file unless you need to exclude someone on purpose, like you've got a duplicate employee record, which you see more often than you'd expect. So you would leave this selection grid set to all. And you can see the federal ID numbers populated. Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and proceed. It does do a large data query, so it may take a minute to load. And it's going to start off with essentially a wizard to walk through some essential selections and confirming some details. So I made some changes to my contact information. So it's saying, okay, these are the changes. I'm going to go okay here. The tax reporting processor does come with this optional test drive mode, but you can also go with the live option here and just close without saving when you're done testing. That's what I'm going to do. See, it populates the company federal ID. Multiple data files window is not often used, but what this is for companies that process payroll in separate company codes in Sage 100 that are actually one legal entity and then hence must be reported in a single W-2 filing. Choosing yes here and clicking next will give you essentially a simplified export-import window. The W-2 forms processor is run from each company you want to combine, then use the save button to save a file in the install. Finally, using the merge button in the final company you're actually filing from in order to select all the files to combine and continue with the W-2, W-3 forms printing or e-filing. I'm not going to click next on that screen because if I do, I have to start all over again. If you do need any assistance with those steps, again, we don't see that often used, but you're always, of course, welcome to reach out to us and open a support ticket for some guidance there. But I'm going to go ahead and click no here. I'm using a single data file to report these details. You'll see here the company information. This was the information entered up in the Library Master Company Maintenance. Looks good. I'm going to click next. Continuing on, you're going to select whether filing for your own company or employer or on behalf of another company. The next window, we're going to have some state tax items. This window is going to display tax items that the forms processor, quote, sees in your data. So valid tax account numbers must be entered for all items present in the window. You can see this tax ID needs a correction. So that's the account number for your business with the tax agency for that particular tax. We get that question a lot. Where do I get these numbers? It's certainly not from Sage. These are your tax account number for the jurisdiction and department that's collecting the taxes that you're taking from the checks. The test employees I have history of payment in California and Michigan, which is why these items are showing up here. Same thing here for special state or local tax items. You're going to need to answer this question carefully. This first question, do you have employees who are exempt from any part of Medicare or Social Security taxes? This is tied to error checking down the line when you're processing the W-2s, and it's a somewhat common mistake. If you have a single employee who is exempt at all from any part of either of these things, you need to click yes so that the error checking works when it's looking at the amounts in the different fields. I'm going to click no here. Carry on. W-3 information. This is going to include things like the kind of payer you are. Most companies are going to be a 941 payer, and any control box options you want. I'm going to go ahead and click next here. Options for showing Social Security numbers. I think most people at this point are going to want it truncated, but you do have the option to choose your encryption or no truncation. And then next. It's going to process for a minute. Get a lot of data that it's pulling in here. So the first pop-up window here, it's really tempting to just click OK through all this, but sometimes it really is telling you something critical. So you really want to review the information in the fields. It's really up to you to verify everything is being reported and filed accurately. It's going to flag things in red fields. This especially, the print a copy. If you see a print a copy button, or there's another button that has a similar verbiage, but essentially that's going to be a record copy for you, for your business to keep. It is not a fileable copy. Oh, the other button is print final. So print a copy, or there's another button that says print final. Those are both going to be record copies for your records. And then the actual processing screen is going to load. So if you realize that you answered any of the questions in that wizard incorrectly and you need to go back, you don't have to close out and start all over. You can access that wizard coming up to the company setup button, or also edit and then company setup. From here, the big takeaway is this green next button. This button should always be the one used to move through each step of the process. The forms preparer will always pop up and prompt you to print the official copy for filing. Again, any print a copy or print final button will be a copy for your own records only. That's why it'll print with grayscale over top. Record copy, not for filing. It's a common call we get every year. But the Aatrix preparers are very thorough, and they will warn you for any errors that will cause a rejection of the forms, like a missing or invalid social security number. So we're going to click next here. We can see it's moving through the progress bar, verifying additional employee information. Oh, and I wanted to highlight as well. So if we scroll over a little bit here, we'll see the amount that I manually entered for the non-taxable overtime portion, right? If we looked back in the employee maintenance for my test overtime person, more tax summary, and again here it's benefits. I've entered this manually for this year. Next year, with all the settings and updates in place, it will track it for you as you process your payroll. You'll see it on your payroll data entry window, breaking it out for you, and then it'll populate this amount for you. So for this year, I've entered it in manually, 4,500 as the qualified non-taxable overtime. And that's what we see populating right onto the preparer screen, which will then, of course, flow to the form itself. My other employee here, my test employee with tips, was paid with the correct built-in tips earnings codes. And so those tips amounts will populate automatically as were required for last year and for this year, because again, these changes the requirements aren't kicking until next year. The tips are a little bit more complicated. All of those numbers are going to be available in the software, the quarterly tax report. And if you do want to file that tip detail for this year's W-2, you can always add any missing fields really on any of the forms. This thing is just powerful. You can right click, insert column, give it a name. A default value would be blank, because that's just going to fill in a default value for everyone. And then you have the drop down here with options. How do you want to allocate? What do you want to do with this box, right? I have entered a tip occupation code, but I would need to enter it manually on the form. Rather, I've entered the tip occupation code on my employee maintenance, but for this year, looking at the form I have, which again is the 2024 W-2, as the new one has been released, it didn't flow in automatically. So I can always add any of that stuff manually so that I have the reporting details the way I want it. Move forward, clicking the next green next step button. It's going to be verifying the federal information and state information, any unassigned columns. Always multiple prompts to make sure your data is accurate. And this one is warning you about employees who have elected to receive an electronic copy. If any of the error tracking windows is telling you about something that won't necessarily cause a form rejection, but is something that the preparer sees that it thinks you should double check, it's going to give you multiple options: a go back and correct and a continue without correcting. If you don't see the continue without correcting, then what it's flagging is going to cause a rejection, and you have to go back and correct and fix that. I go forward here. The preparers really are very thorough. Aatrix is a great company. They're always on top of any changes in the forms or any tweaks, common issues. They improve this error checking every year. But this is basically an ad. They also offer a full, complete e-filing service for the W-2s. If you don't want to do the complete e-filing service, you can choose a combination or print all. So if I don't want to choose the complete service, I come down here to the other options. We're going to choose Print Employee W-2s. And you can see it selects to e-file the other items for me. You need to be careful with these selections because we see this issue a lot every year. What you select here is going to be what prints out as you move through the steps. If you're missing a state W-2 printing out or something else you're expecting to print out, then you have missed the correct options on this screen and you'll need to go back and select them. So I'm going to select all the print options here. But be aware that seemingly every year the threshold for e-filing gets a little bit lower. And right now I'm processing for 3 employees, so I don't meet that threshold, but it is up to you, the business, whoever's filing these forms, to ensure that if you pass the threshold, you do need to choose an e-filing option. So it's just a warning there. And that was the same pop-up warning. So I've selected all my print options. I'm going to go ahead and hit next and proceed. Basically another ad here, so go ahead and just click next. The e-filing service is great. You know, Aatrix will do everything for you. If you choose the complete package, they have an online portal as well on their website where you can access the records. They'll send out the copies to your employees. It's really a great service if you choose to use it. I'm going to keep going next here. And this is where you will see just a quick summary of your selections. So just give it a cursory glance, make sure that you see everything that you want to either print or e-file. Next. So I want to mention another article from our knowledge base at this point while this thing is thinking. Because this is another common question at year end. So this is the article on which forms do I need? What forms do I need to print W-2s, 1095s, 1099s? Guess our knowledge base is having a bit of a day here. Just give it a minute. But essentially when this article loads, it will show you that the red pre-printed forms that have often in years past been required for filing printed copies with the federal agencies are no longer required. They haven't been required for several years. You can print all of this stuff either from directly onto plain paper, or some of them may require a pre-perforated 4-part or 4-up blank page. That seems to be having a bit of an issue, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump right back in here. So this is the 4-up, right? So you've got 4 tiles here or different sheets. Here's our print final button. Again, not the one that you're going to print to file, always next step. We can see we're starting off report 1 of 7, the Michigan W-2. Click next. Would you like to print? Yes. Please insert the 4-part blank perforated W-2 paper you purchased. Okay, got that in my printer. Obviously, I'm printing the file here, but you'll be printing to your actual printer. And this is the Michigan W-2. So it'll print that. It's going to move through step 2 of 7, employee W-2. Next step here. There are obviously, for anyone who's done this for a number of years, there's a number of versions of the W-2 and W-3. But for those people who are newer to the process, look carefully because it will, they will look similar, but you'll see at the bottom the copy D for employer. The form will print out with the required detail, and it will tell you exactly which version it is, because there's going to be a bunch of this. There's not just a W-2 that you send to the employee, right? There's multiple versions. And the progress bar at the top will guide you through as well. So this one's the employer W-2. We're going to push next step. Insert the blank pre-perforated W-2 paper. Okay. Once that's done, it's going to load report 4 of 7, the 941 federal W-2, which is a 2-part form. Print that as well. Read these carefully. This one cannot be printed on perforated paper. Insert plain paper now. Okay. This one, of course, is report 5 of 7, 941 W-3. Print that as well. I'm going to fill in some numbers here on these required fields. This is a Michigan state form. So it's going to go through all the state things that I've selected on those earlier windows. And finally, the last report of 7 of 7, which is going to be the W-2 notice. And the reason I've gone through printing all of those steps is to highlight the screen that you will see, obviously some other details as well, but the screen that you will see when you've completed the process, right? This is a really common mistake that we get every year as well. People won't use the next button to go all the way through printing the final employee notice. If you don't, there's no completed session and there's no archive of that. It's sitting as a pending, not quite finished processing session. You need to go all the way through it until you get to this window so that you've completed your session. I'm going to go ahead and click close here. That is essentially the archive options window. If I pull the software back up, because, guaranteed somebody's going to lose their W-2, right? You're going to need to reprint at least one, most likely. So payroll, period end, federal and state tax reporting. I think we're definitely going to go a little bit long in the session today, but that's okay. See, another payroll tax update's been released just today. I'm going to skip that for now. And here's my tax reporting window. So instead of federal or state, I'm going to choose existing reports from the form type, and then just go ahead and proceed at the bottom right. It may take a minute to load. Again, there's a lot of detail and data, but what you'll get is this screen. It will be a list of the different records of the different processing sessions for different forms that you've completed. I'll select my W-2, W-3 we just ran through together and push edit. You always want to push edit because the view print button there will just print a record of the screen itself, whereas you really want the W-2. So select the item, push edit. It's going to process for a moment, and then we're going to get back to this screen that we saw a minute ago. So that's how you access the archive. If you do need to reprint completed W-2s, if you need to start completely over, if you haven't distributed any copies, if you need to kind of pick up where you've left off, or if you need to correct something, if you need to issue a W-2C, this is how you do it. So I'm going to close that. So that's pretty much our overview of the W-2, W-3 processing steps. I'd like to take a quick look at the Affordable Care Act forms, the setup of it. We aren't going to run through all those forms. There is still a copy of the recording of the webinar from last year. And in that second session from last year, I reviewed all of this as well. So again, these ACA forms haven't gone anywhere. They're still required, still the same setup as years past. And they have to be set up every year. So the first step is setting up each employee in the ACA employee maintenance window. You'll select from the same master list of employees, and a common question is regarding the box for self-insured coverage. Again, there's no option to copy from one year to the next because the regular payroll processing doesn't capture the required information for ACA forms. So let's take a look at those windows. That's payroll, ACA. We'll start with ACA employee maintenance. Here's your employee lookup. Make sure you've got the right calendar year selected. I'm going to use my lady demo. And the common misconception here is this box for provided employer-sponsored self-insured coverage. What does that even really mean? I always use Sage as an example. So Sage has a bank account where employee health insurance premium deductions are deposited. When there's a payout, it's deducted from that account as well. Most smaller companies have a health plan management company that handles this for them. If your company is self-insured, then you check this box and you can see that the covered individuals box will unlock. It becomes available for entering other people covered by the plan, other covered individuals, your spouse, child, what have you. So if you're not self-insured, you uncheck that box and you're only reporting for the employee themselves. Go ahead and hit accept. Oh, I'm sorry. Also, monthly detail is a critical window here. This is where you're going to be setting the offer of coverage, the employee share of lowest cost, and any applicable safe harbor codes. These offer of coverage, applicable safe harbor codes, these come from the government, and you'll need to choose from the options that get updated from our product updates, but these are created by the government. So one trick here is if the details are the same for the whole year, just like in other windows in Sage 100, if you set this first line and push the cog over here, it'll copy it down. Well, that didn't work the way I wanted it to. Let's see. There we go. So that if it's all the same, you just kind of enter one line, copy it down. The next step in the ACA process is going to be running the applicable large employer report, which will use the government's three-step formula to determine the full-time equivalent. You get a warning to make sure you check the details. It's always up to the user to check to make sure what you're reporting is accurate. But this will crunch the numbers for you and determine full-time equivalent or FTE employee counts for each month. You can see it's going to default for the whole calendar year, which is what we want. I'm just going to go ahead and push preview. I've got limited data entered for example purposes, which is why my report shows data only for some months at the beginning, but your employee counts should populate across the months, and they will vary according to how your employee count varies. Obviously, if you are running a ski hill, the numbers are going to be in the winter months, so it is up to you to double check these counts. Again, it's a full-time equivalent, so it does go through a multi-step government formula, but this will crunch the numbers for you. And when you close it, it'll prompt you to update these counts to your employer ACA window, which is where we'll go next. So that's payroll, of course, ACA and ACA employer maintenance. Select the year. And if we come into the monthly detail, we'll see those counts populated from the report I just ran and closed and then updated. Another common issue we see is the ACA form type setting not saving correctly. That's this drop-down setting here. If you've set up everything as I've demonstrated, but are finding that no employees are populating the form, come back into this window and change this setting from the one you actually want to the other option. So I want a C form, we're going to switch it to B. Push accept, then you come back in, select this and switch it back down to the one you actually want and push accept again. Basically, you're just re-saving that setting because it may not have saved correctly the first time. It's critical for that to work. It's critical that you push the accept button in between those steps. So that's a common call we get as well. And that should then align the form setting correctly so that it transfers the data to the correct ACA form that you've selected to run in the tax reporting window. Of course, these are federal forms. We look at the lookup. We see the 1095, 94B, and the C forms here, right? So we want the program to be telling the tax reporting add-on to take the data to the right form. And so that's what that's all about. I'm not going to run through this again. If you would like to, you can see last year's recording. There's lots of information and articles on how to process those forms. They've been out for a long time. Really common that we see people catching up on prior year forms with the ACA forms. So like I said yesterday, Aatrix does have a process for handling those prior year forms. Just make sure that you reach out to them first before you submit anything for a prior year. Okay. That is going to bring us to 1099s. So running 1099s in Sage, obviously we've talked a lot about the recommended updates. Really, you want to have those all installed. And we're going to look at that as well. So I'm using my ABC company here, which is where I've got my vendor set up. The first stop is always to just make sure that your accounts payable options has the 1099 reporting turned on at all. Not everybody needs it. And it's going to be right on the main tab on the right side here, 1099 reporting. Just want to make sure your calendar year is set to the correct year. Push accept. And then we'll look at our vendors. Starting with the airway property. If we look at the additional tab, we can see the 1099 form options on the right side. Ideally, you want to have your vendor default settings in place throughout the year so that the invoice amounts automatically tabulate into the correct reporting fields. This vendor is set as an individual type and the non-employee compensation form, which is why the social security number field is showing, as well as fields for the first, middle, and last name of the person. We can click on the 1099 history button to confirm or edit any of the 1099 amounts for this vendor. This is the screen. So if you've got your default set correctly through the year, as you pay this vendor, the amounts will tabulate into the correct boxes automatically. If you need to adjust anything, for example, moving amounts into the new field for the excess parachute payments here, as we've discussed, you can do so right in this window. Next vendor to look at is going to be all climate maintenance. We can see they're set to a business type, which is why there is a taxpayer ID number field in place of the social security number field, as well as an alternate 1099 business name. Just like the last vendor, we have a 1099 history button, and we can confirm and edit any 1099 amounts for reporting. This is the miscellaneous. You can see that you've got records for different form types for each vendor as well if you really needed it. And then to actually run the 1099 forms, we'll go to the accounts payable, reports, and then form 1099 tax reporting. So this is the same tax reporting add-on. It's just tucked into a different window here so that you can access it directly in accounts payable and not have to go through payroll windows to get to a 1099 form. You will, of course, want to double check that you're running new forms because this also has an archive option, and then the correct version of the 1099 you need to run. In this case, we're going to go with the non-employee compensation. And use our airway example. Again, this is going to run for a minute. And it's going to take you through a number of the same options. We're not going to run through a complete session here either on the 1099s as we are getting close to running out of time. But at this point, the things to watch for are the same as with the other form processing we've looked at. Always use the next button to work through the steps. Watch for the pop-up windows prompting you to print the official forms, if printing, and make sure to complete the process all the way through to the end. Questions for forms processing may be very specific to your business, and we have many other knowledge base articles with instructions for common year-end scenarios. Please reach out to us using our chat option for quick and easy things, or you can submit a case online, and as always, we can be reached by phone as well. When you do actually run through the 1099 processing and you've completed that session, you will get this standard prompt to increment the default calendar year to the next year. If you have completed successfully your 1099s processing, you'll click next year, or I'm sorry, yes. I'm gonna go ahead and click no. And that brings us to our question and answer portion. So let's open it up to Q&A. And Linda, do we have any items that remain unanswered that look good?
Hi, Alec. This is, I've answered most of the questions. A lot of the questions have to do with the details of these new bills. So I have to refer them to your article that you mentioned at the first of the webinar. We can't answer some of those questions.
Right.
On industries and things like that. There is a question right now, who gets a 1099 miscellaneous? Who gets a 1099 NEC? If you want to answer that one.
So yeah, basically, we're Sage, we're not the IRS. So kind of the easy way to answer that is to look at the fields. It's really up to the business to follow the IRS guidelines and to report accordingly. For the most part, really most vendors are going to be getting an NEC. Now that is the most common form. Here's my NEC, but you can see the fields that are reporting here. non-employee compensation. If they're a vendor and they're a contractor, they're just not an employee and you're paying them on a contractual basis. This is the field basically for most, but you really need to follow the IRS guidelines to confirm which vendors are going to fall into which categories and which 1099 version you need to use.
And the miscellaneous have completely different fields. So, that would give you an idea, like rents and things like that.
Yeah, let me get back in there here.
There was a lot of good questions. I think I answered most of them that I could. There was one I was a little concerned about, and I don't really have an answer. Maybe you do. It was regarding overtime on tips, and that the rate keeps changing the way they do tip reporting. And I don't really have the answer to that about the rate changing. As long as we have the overtime rate in there, the system is going to take the multiplier and calculate the non-taxable tips or non-taxable overtime. So I don't think that this is an issue. I think it's going to work the same as it does. It's just not going to look at the regular rate times the multiplier as the overtime rate all the time if you're going to change that rate. But I might follow up on that question. I don't know the answer for sure.
Yeah, as I've tried to highlight, there's been a lot, there's always more complexity to any of these things than the people writing the legislation imagine there is, or, that we'd like to have. It's complicated. It will, we will be issuing more documentation and knowledge base articles for the stuff that we can direct you to, the fields that we've created to handle the government requirements. But if you do have, a bunch of overtime kind of in flux, you may want to set up multiple earnings codes. That might be part of it. But again, those details we're still kind of getting into and confirming and testing. All that final stuff is being finalized. So I guess coming soon to a theater near you or coming soon to a knowledge base near you are going to be more articles to help you work through those types of questions.
Like yesterday, we got several questions in right at the end here. If you have time, I can read them off and see if we can answer them quickly. When is the soonest we can install the updates from Aatrix?
They will come through automatically. They'll be ready when they're ready. And
they will have everything by the 20th release.
That is the expectation. Yeah, by the 20th.
Yeah.
Again, barring any unforeseen hiccups or delays.
Exactly. Another question, how do you generate a listing of your 1099s in Sage? I think the question is a report maybe from accounts payable.
Yeah. I'll
is what they're asking.
It out anyway. If you're looking for the information to kind of check and confirm that you've got all your vendors set up for 1099s that need to be set up, a great place to start is your payment history report, because that is going to give you obviously details of what you've paid your different vendors. You can also show 1099 vendors only and just review those settings. So that's a great place to start. I hope that helps.
This question came up earlier about how can we get a copy of the slide deck that came up earlier regarding that it will be posted on the community hub. Do we need to install Payroll 2.26 before doing payroll year-end processing for 2025, or only before running the first payroll in 2026?
You don't need to install it before you run period end processing, but you absolutely can, because it's not going to hurt anything. I did an article a handful of years ago, and this is another article linked. Hopefully our knowledge base is, there we go. So a lot of these common questions are all located together here in this year-end FAQ for Sage 100. It's going to give you the pertinent information about the updates specifically, there's a link to the article Linda wrote with some detail about the changes for the 1099s, the things that are coming for next year. And you'll find other questions like that. Can I run payroll for January 2026 before running period end processing? The big thing to remember is you just need to run period end processing to close your payroll year before you start next year. You need to make sure that there's that clean year rollover that you tell the program so that it can do what it needs to do and reset what it needs to reset to roll into next year. Whether you install the 2.26.0 update before or after won't make a difference. You can just go ahead and install it as soon as it's available.
Yeah, and then you're covered if there is something in there that affects maybe a form or something for 2025, you'll have it. Save you a call.
Exactly. We wouldn't build it so that would cause a problem. It'll always be safe. So, yeah.
And I think we caught up on the questions. If not, I guess we'll
Great.
post them out there.
Yeah, just like last time, the slide deck will be available on the portal, or I'm sorry, not the portal, the community site, along with the recordings of these sessions. And this very helpful resources page has direct links. It's got our phone number for support and links to our chat and the knowledge base, all sorts of useful stuff. Here is the article or the slide I mentioned before. It's got links to the different knowledge base articles I've referenced as I've worked through these. You can always search for them directly on the knowledge base or use the links built in right here. And we really appreciate everyone attending. I really hope it's been helpful and that everyone's gotten at least something out of it. But of course, don't hesitate to reach out and open a support ticket with us directly if you need to. Okay.
Or for quick questions, go on the community post. Either another user or partner can answer your question quickly, or maybe it's already out there.
That's right. Yeah, you can actually post questions on the community site itself if you're even looking for kind of more general information, all sorts of things. Lots of our certified partners hang out on that site. Many of our most knowledgeable and senior staff, like Linda, also will be answering questions that get posted to the community site. So another resource that you can use. And on that note, I wish everyone a smooth year end and happy 2026. Thanks for attending.